Hi, I'm Ben from Hack Engineering. Today we're going to discuss issues with N54, N55 and S55 crankshafts. The cranks themselves, not really a problem. The issue that you might have seen online or maybe experienced yourself is spinning of the crank hub, and basically that allows the timing to slip. So the issue is basically the way BMW designed these engines, the crankshaft goes in and then afterwards you drop the timing chain and everything in with all its sprockets already installed, and then you basically slide this hub through, lock it off with a bolt, and that's your timing all set. The issue is essentially, well, issue number one, that bolt can come loose and that allows the timing to slip, or the other issue is, not necessarily the bolt coming loose, but the outright friction just allowing these sprockets to turn on the hub, which is certainly not ideal and can essentially lead to catastrophic engine failure. So cranks didn't used to be made like this. We'll just show you how they used to be made so you get an idea of the differences in the way they're done now. Then we'll show you some fixes to the problem, and then we'll discuss basically how to make sure that's then bulletproof forevermore. So this is an older crank here, an M52 in particular. This kind of setup was used by quite a few of the older engines. So you still have one big bolt in the middle, which is threaded into the end of the crank, just like it is on an S55. And then you've got your various pieces on the end. However, the big difference with these is that you have a keyway that is machined into the crank. So that's got a key all the way down it, which means it just slides on. The same for the sprockets, you've got keyways here and here. So it can only go on one way, and once it's on, there's no way that can turn. This is, key steel, which is extremely strong, and that is why the older cranks don't have the problems that the newer ones do. To show you the difference with the newer model, obviously it's still got that big crank bolt through the middle. The older crank has a nose on the crank that these parts will sit on, whereas this doesn't. So there's absolutely nothing there, and the sprockets sit instead on this hub here, which simply sits in like there. So the problem is, essentially, you've got the torque of the engine, you've got cams to turn, you've got various items running off this, like fuel pump and whatnot. To be honest, that fuel pump sprocket also runs the oil pump. That's not the problem, it's this timing one here. So either, if your bolt backs out, this whole lot can spin, or that can just spin on there. So that kind of shows you what the problem is with that. It's all multiple pieces. Lots of chance of going wrong. I think BMW get discredited a lot for the way they've done that. It is actually relatively clever, but it just hasn't worked out for them. As mentioned, there's a couple of problems. The first of which is this bolt coming loose. So it's quite a simple fix out there. That this is one that we've actually had made ourselves under the Koflek Engine Development kind of banner. So this essentially goes over the front of the crank, and you can then put your pulley bolt through here. There's a pulley that sits in between, which is why it probably all looks a bit out of kilter. And essentially that holds the bolt there. So it locks the bolt by having the bolts around the outside, so the bolt physically can't come loose. That stops the bolt loosening, which then stops the hub spinning from that kind of cause of the issue. So that's a nice simple one. Don't need to take the engine apart. No internals or anything need to be disturbed. However, good though that is, and it fixes, a lot of them are sort of having issues because of that bolt coming loose. That fixes a lot of problems. It's not a complete fix, which is where the next part really comes in. So here's a quick comparison. That's your standard crank. It's got, as we said, absolutely nothing on the end that really holds it into the crank itself, only the friction of the bolt against it. Not really ideal. There are various solutions out there. Some of them involve drilling the crank. We've gone into all sorts, really looked into it. We've got the advantage of having OE engine designers on our team who can really stress analyse these things and actually look at the way things should be done and the way they should be made, and perhaps how BMW should have done it from factory. So ideally, what you do is design a whole new crank with a front piece just like the older ones, that allows you some sort of solid lengthways keyway, a proper deep key that stops that hub spinning. But unfortunately the way the engine goes together, that's not really possible, and also having to buy a whole new crank to fix the issue isn't really what we're all going for with this. So as I said, various solutions involve drilling into the crank. To be honest, we're not keen on that at all, not just because you're then drilling into a built engine that's, you know, you're going to put debris through it, but also just the strength of that. It's not really designed to hold torque. Those kind of keys are really just for alignment, and seeing them in that application, though it does seem to work for most people, I'm not convinced of the longevity of it, and it's not one that we could really stand behind. So the result of all our research was really liking the look of the Vargas Turbo Technologies hub. So these have a spline cut into the end of them, which as you tighten it into the crank, just cuts its way into the crank slightly, and really strengthens it up, and it means it can't turn. Also, the key part is that the timing sprocket is part of the hub, so that can't spin on the hub. You know, it's physically impossible unless you break that thing in half, which is not going to happen anytime soon. So essentially, once that's tightened in, that's locked to the crank, and that is part of the hub, so you don't get any more timing slips, which is exactly what we're all after, and we think it's a really nice fix to the problem. Got them listed on our website, got some installs of them coming up, which of course we'll photograph and video the whole way through. Just show you the way to do things properly and the way that we're going to be doing things from now on. So in summary, you've got the standard crank up here, the Vargas one here that we are, you know, much preferring and which we're going to be using from now on. What we'd recommend is using one of these with a crank hub bolt capture plate. So that'll stop the bolt coming out, and obviously this stops the hub spinning on there, and then this part of it stops the sprocket spinning on the hub. Problem solved, and yeah, get shopping online now and we can get you sorted with them. Please also don't forget to subscribe and to like this video, just so we know what you guys are enjoying so we can make more of it. See you next time.